I was totally shocked by the July 13 assassination attempt. And as a media person, I was shocked that they had some Pulitzer Prize winning photographers that had never gone to a Trump rally before waiting there on stage to take the photos of his splattered brains and to get that on the news wires as quickly as possible to shock America into accepting this agenda
That
of
is so key because they hadn't covered in a year any of his rallies live. You're right. They had all these reporters there and they were all covering on every channel. Wow, that's a big piece of evidence.
Yeah, and it was a setup as a photo op in that regard, and they wanted they wanted to create, post traumatic stress disorder by flashing that photo of Trump head exploding on the air for 24 hours a day for weeks on end, like 9/11 put those towers collapsing. Everyone had PTSD for weeks, if not months afterward, just watching the image over and over again. And that image would be playing still to this day, every day, all day. And this would provide, as everyone is in shock, cover to bring in all kinds of political hijinks. And obviously, you've seen a coup in the Democratic Party. You've got Kamala Harris that's been selected and is now running for president, and her running mate is a arch communist. And that's the game plan: is to go into a communist, dictatorial style government in the United States.
But you just said it perfectly. They wanted to blow his head off to demoralize and trigger a civil war. We have Jamie Raskin saying their only plan is civil war now. How is it going for the globalist faction? What do you think is going to unfold now?
Well, for those who pray to God, I think let's pray harder, because I think that's the only thing that stands between the U.S. and outright tyranny at this point would be the God as he intervened on July 13th. I really do believe that 5/100th of a second difference between life and death for Trump on that date was divine intervention. And that's what we have to rely on. And throughout history, sometimes that's the only thing you have to rely on, and sometimes it works. And I think the U.S. is on the precipice now of being completely obliterated by this nefarious political global entity, or the globalists, as you call them, who essentially, it gets down to this, Alex, and it ties into what I've been talking to you about for 20 years, the corruption in the central banks and the banks. So the global Ponzi scheme is really running out of steam. And so to dovetail into like looking at the banks a little bit here, last week they had a huge story about the yen carry trade. This is something that was suddenly on everyone's lips. It's something I've talked about for many years. I've talked to you on your show about it. What is the yen carry trade? And it just speaks to the nature of the global central banking system, which has never been more leveraged and never been more fragile. And they are in a position where they have to either print and 30-40 trillion dollars worth of more fiat paper to bail out these banks, or if they go into a situation where they let the banks fail, then that definitely will precipitate complete social unrest, and then they want to be able to deal with that. I noticed last week the only stock price that was up during that flash crash in the market was Raytheon. The defense contractors, of course, are going to make out like bandits in any kind of situation like this. But it all goes back to what happens when an economy like the United States or other economies around the world, they forsake hard money and real money and real accountability and real accounting, and they rely on money printing. And the money printing is always in the hands of the worst parts of society. And you have the worst people in charge of the money printers. Technically, it's called a kakistocracy, ruled by the worst amongst us. It's worse than even a kleptocracy. And this is the problem, is that the people with the worst intentions are the ones with the greatest control over the money printing, and they're doing the worst possible things they can do.
And Bukele shows with real leadership, they can instantly turn things around.
Yeah, Bukele is really the new shining city on a hill. El Salvador is coming out of the fourth turning. El Salvador was in a 40-year bear market. They went through a civil war. They went through the gang war. And they really are what America should be aspiring to. They also put Bitcoin as a strategic reserves on the state's balance sheet, and they made Bitcoin legal tender.